Welcome to the Read Aloud of Outlearning the Wolves, Surviving and Thriving in a Learning Organization by David Hutchins. Right now, you may be asking yourself, why do I need to spend my valuable time listening to a fairy tale about sheep and wolves and learning? Well, that's a good question. Don't let the fun tone of Outlearning the Wolves fool you. A big part of learning is fun. And metaphors like the ones you will hear are valuable ways to eliminate new truths about the world in which we live. Listen to the sheep in the story. They have some important ideas to share. Ideas that can have a far-reaching impact on the way organizations do business on a global scale, as well as the way you do your work on a day-to-day basis. This is a wolf. This is a sheep. Wolves eat sheep. Any questions? Wolves have always eaten sheep. They always will eat sheep. If you are a sheep, you accept this as a fact of life. A flock of sheep once lived together in a beautiful green pasture, but the flock's existence was not a peaceful one. The wolves posed a constant threat, casting a shadow of fear over the pasture. Sometimes the flock would settle in to sleep at night and awake in the morning to find one of them was gone. There were several miles of sharp barbed wire fence that surrounded the sheep's fields, but the wolves came anyway. It was hard to live amid such uncertainty. Still, over the years, the flock got bigger and bigger and bigger. The occasional loss, though very sad, was to be expected. This was the way it had always been. Another chapter. This is Otto. You should know that Otto will face an untimely demise by the end of this story. Don't get too attached to him. Otto was saddened by the rest of the flock's resignation to the wolves. I have a dream, said Otto, perched on a hill, where the rest of the flock could hear him. I dream of a day when not another sheep will ever die to become breakfast for a wolf. Well, that is absurd, said Shep the sheep. You cannot stop the wolf. Remember the inspiring words of our ancestors? The wolf will come just as the sun will rise, and also that wolves are jerks. Indeed, I believe we are to be commended, said another sheep, for we have prospered beneath the shadow of the wolf. Just look at how many of us there are. And this made Otto even sadder. As long as the wolf is present, our strong numbers tell us only a half-truth, said Otto. We tell ourselves we are strong, so we won't have to face up to the ways we are weak. Otto continued, we all say the wolf cannot be stopped, but how do we know this is true? And a sheep named Curly answered, it is true. Why, even the fence that surrounds us cannot keep the wolves away. At first, it stopped them, but they must have learned to jump over it. Wolves learn very quickly, Curly added. Then we must learn even more quickly, said Otto. We must make learning an ongoing part of life in the flock. We will become a learning flock. But we do learn, said Shep, mildly indignant. Why, just the other day, I learned to pull a thorn out of my hoof with my teeth, and all the other sheep, especially those with thorns in their hooves, raised their eyebrows in interest. And I have learned to dig a hole. Watch this, said Gigi, as she began vigorously clawing at the ground. I can push rocks around with my nose to make a pile, offered Jerome, who was just barely following the conversation. An excited murmur arose among the sheep at these new insights, which they thought perhaps were obvious to you and me, were quite innovative and useful in the sheep world. Well, this learning is a good start, said Otto, a little encouraged. Ideas like these must be shared for the benefit of the flock. But to thrive in the shadow of the wolf, it is not enough. We need a different kind of learning if we are to be a true learning flock. Well, the flock looked down sheepishly. They were were trying hard to understand. After some silence, Curly spoke. Perhaps we could sleep in a circle. And Otto motioned for her to continue. Well, said Curly, I think we could protect ourselves better if we slept in a huddle and not scattered all over the place. That way, when the wolves come, it will be harder for them to get us. But that doesn't really address the problem of the wolves, said Marietta, a little lamb. But no one heard her. The sheep were too excited by Curly's idea. Yes, yes, they said. Tonight we will huddle against the wolves. Learning may be a good idea after all. Otto was frustrated by the sheep's attempt at learning, which to him seemed awfully reactionary. But he felt relieved to see them at least united in purpose. This was a good first step. The least I can do, he thought, is to stay awake tonight and keep guard while they sleep. Warning! This brings us to the part of the story where Otto cashes in his chips. Take comfort in knowing that he is going to a better place, where he will join Lassie, Old Yella, and Bambi's mother. The next night, Otto watched as the sky darkened and the sheep gathered together in a huddle. By the time the crescent moon was high in the summer sky, the flock had fallen fast asleep. The next morning, Otto was gone. Yet another chapter. When the flock woke the next morning to find Otto gone, they were devastated. Otto was a good sheep, sighed Shep. He showed us a vision of a better day, eulogized Curly. He had fleece as white as snow, someone from the back said. Jerome didn't say anything. He just pushed a bunch of rocks into a pile with his nose. Perhaps not the most effective coping mechanism, but it worked for him. But the mood soon turned sour. Those wolves, this is all their fault, moaned Curly. Well, what are we supposed to do? Cried Shep. The wolves are smart, and they are strong, and they cannot be stopped. Our lives would be so much better if there were no wolves. If only that stupid fence were taller, so the wolves couldn't jump over it. And the flock just sat there, dejected and miserable. Finally, Marietta, the little lamb, spoke again. How come the wolves only come sometimes and not all the time? She asked. And everyone stopped. They looked confused. Marietta continued. If wolves are smart and they can jump over the fence anytime they want, how come they don't come every night? If I were a wolf, that's what I would do. I would feast on sheep all the time. And the others looked even more confused. All I'm saying, said Marietta, is that maybe the wolves aren't as unstoppable as we think. Something is stopping them, at least some of the time. Well, what are you getting at, Marietta? Asked Shep. I'm saying the same thing Otto said. We must learn. We must do it together. And we must learn faster than the wolves. We tried being a learning flock already, said Shep, and look where it got Otto. That's because we've only just started, said the wise little lamb. Look at what just happened. We tried something different, but the results we got were the same. What does that tell you? Everyone had to admit it was a pretty good question, but no one had an answer. And Marietta explained, it tells me it isn't enough just to change the way we do things. We must also broaden our vision and see the bigger picture. We need to learn how to learn differently. How? Everyone wanted to know. We can start by doing 3 things. 1, remember Otto's vision. Someday, not another sheep will ever die because of wolves. From now on, everything we learn must lead us toward the vision. 2, everyone says that wolves are too smart and cannot be stopped. We have all made all of our decisions thinking this is true. And maybe it is. But what if it isn't? And number 3, let's figure out how to do things differently. What do we have to do to stop the wolves? What is it like to be a wolf? Let's go and get some ideas and information. Let's find out as much about the wolves as we can. Then let's share everything we know with each other. Why don't we each do something on our own and then meet here this afternoon to talk? The meeting adjourned and the sheep all went their separate ways. Some of the sheep struggled with what Marietta had said. Learning may be all well and good, but if that fence isn't tall enough to keep out wolves, there's nothing we can do. We don't have the tools to make it taller. I won't stand for this kind of disrespect to our ancestors. They taught us that wolves were a fact of life. That little you is making a mockery of our heritage. But some of the sheep took what Marietta said to heart. Marietta's right. The wolves only seem to come at certain times. That just doesn't make sense. Last summer when we had the drought, the wolves seemed to come more often. Maybe the wolves aren't jumping over the fence. It's pretty high. I don't think any animal is that strong. And later that afternoon, all the sheep came back together to talk. A feeling of excitement buzzed among them. Impressed by the turnout, Jerome made an attempt to count the sheep, but strangely, he found himself becoming so sleepy he had to stop. Shep began the meeting. Friends, we are here today in memory of Otto and his vision to eliminate 100% of deaths due to wolf attacks. Does anyone have anything to share? And the sheep all shared their thoughts. They engaged in a dialogue on whether a wolf could really jump over the fence. They discussed the timing of wolf-related casualties and how they seem to decrease after hard rains and increase during hot and dry periods. They even confessed how difficult it was for them to rethink their own long-held beliefs about wolves. Just talking about these things energized the flock and gave them hope. Suddenly, Curly came trotting up, out of breath but very excited. Follow me, hurry, she said. And confused, the sheep ran off after her, not at all sure where Curly was leading them. The final chapter. The flock hurried after Curly for about a mile. Soon they came to the fence, right at the spot where a small stream ran underneath it. This was the same stream where the sheep often drank, although never this close to the fence for fear of the wolves. Look, said Curly, pointing with her hoof to the spot where the fence crossed over the water. There, just above the surface of the water and caught on the barbed wire, was a small clump of sheep's wool. I was looking around for answers and I found this, but I don't know what it means, she said. And the sheep looked at each other in confusion. Finally, someone spoke up. I've got it. The wolves aren't going over the fence. They're going under the fence. And another sheep excitedly added, well, that makes sense. When there is a drought, there is no water going under the fence. That's when the wolves crawl under. And after it rains, there's too much water. And the wolves can't go under, explained another. And the sheep got even more excited. So I guess that means that wolves can't swim. And everyone laughed. Perhaps the wolves weren't so smart after all. There's only one problem, someone said. We can't control when it rains. We're still at the mercy of the wolves. And now we're at the mercy of the weather, too. And the flock fell silent. Then Gigi spoke. I think we're looking at the wrong problem again. It's true, we can't control the weather, but we can control the flow of the water. Now watch this. And Gigi began to dig a hole, pawing at the ground under the fence with her hooves. Soon, some of the other sheep joined in. Well, don't just stand there. Everybody help, someone yelled. Well, I can push rocks around with my nose to make a pile, Jerome offered. And he began building a small dam with rocks a few feet downstream. Shep stood by, pulling thorns out of the hooves of the other sheep as they were digging. Soon, a small pond began to form around the fence. Amazed by this achievement, the sheep let out a spontaneous, collective bleating sound. It's an irritating noise, but it's joyful if you're another sheep. In the days that followed, the flock had a beautiful pond around which they could gather and drink and play. And best of all, the wolves stopped coming. The sheep stopped disappearing, and the fear was gone. I'm glad we became a learning flock, the sheep would later say, as they nestled safely into sleep at night. It feels good to know that we'll never have to go through anything like that ever again. But maybe they would. The end. Right now, you may still be asking yourself, why did I have to spend my valuable time listening to a fairy tale about sheep and wolves and learning? Did you really listen to the sheep in the story? The metaphors used in Outlearning the Wolves are applicable to all learning organizations. In the Module 8 discussion forum, you are to reflect upon the metaphors in Outlearning the Wolves as it applies to organizational behavior, theory, and learning. How might these metaphors apply directly to your own organization and experiences?